Welcome back to Garage Time. My name is Tom and this is my car, a Mac. And this is going to be a continuation video on something I did years ago, which is the front strut bar brace. It was a bit of a contentious video because I was suggesting that the front strut bar brace doesn't do much. And we're going to do some actual testing while driving the car today. So check it out. This is going to be a bit of weird science in this video. This is the instrumentation that's needed to measure the actual loads in the strut bar while driving. So I'm going through some calibration now with this big weight on it. This is the data acquisition system, the computer, some of the math and hardware needed to make this work. I actually picked up an inverter just to be able to run my computers while driving the car with 12 volts. All right, so before I start just putting instruments in the car and driving it like mad, let me give you a little quick summary about the previous video. I'll put a link to it right here. It's a longer video. I basically was in the mood of increasing the stiffness and the strength of the chassis before I painted it. So I was going through all kinds of provisions to add coilovers and strengthen the strut areas, and I seam welded the front of the chassis, and I added like the roll bar and door bars and all this like stuff to make the chassis stiffer prior to painting it. And I wanted to have some understanding of what the future benefits might be. And because the car wasn't driving at the time, it got a little bit of pushback. People were like, okay, well, tell me when you drive it. So that's what today's video is. I will drive it. This car has a big 911 engine in it, 3.2 liter. I just completed an autocross. It's well sorted mechanically. There's no bugs in the way it drives. So now we can actually kind of put it through its paces and do some testing. The other thing is, because this was a little bit of a contentious video, YouTube in their algorithms, sent it to a lot of people that weren't Porsche people. So my original assertion was that the strut bar is not that effective in this car, only this car. This is a 74 air-cooled 911 rear engine torsion bar suspension. So there's not much weight in the front. We're talking about the front strut bar. And basically, because there's no coilover suspension, all the loads for the spring action of the suspension are taken into the chassis much lower to the body. One of the advantages of torsion bar suspension is it keeps the center of gravity low. And that's what this 911 has. So the forces in the strut towers are only the damper forces. They're not the spring forces. That's very different in cars like BMW M3s or basically any other car that uses coilover suspension. All the suspension loads go up into those strut towers. So you combine that with a front engine car, which like in a Mustang, you got a heavy engine in the front, just like this is a heavy engine in the back. That puts a lot more loads on the front suspension, and the shock towers have to handle all the suspension loads. So adding a strut brace across the shock towers in other cars very well could have a lot of performance improvements. My assumption in what I thought I proved last time is that it doesn't do much in an air-cooled 911. The other thing that happens quite often in the Porsche community is there's this ideology that if Porsche did it, they did it for a purpose. And then they move those items from the race car onto the street and think like, okay, this has got to work. And in some cases, they do. I like to test everything beforehand. I was able to measure when you put the strut bar in and you put diagonal braces in there, it does increase the torsional rigidity of the chassis. I measured that. And I fully believe, and I put the pieces in my car to be able to run the strut bar. I just don't think that the individual strut bar that goes across and bolts on, I don't think you're going to see much improvement in one of those. Porsche, back in the day in the 911R, they had a welded in strut brace. Some of the RSR cars had these big cross braces, and there's debate whether that was for crash protection or if that was something that the body guys did to keep the car straight in the event of an accident, so they didn't have to do as much work on the tub. I mean, we really don't know the rationale behind Porsche, but there's a lot of people that believe that it's a performance benefit. I guess we'll never know. I'm here to try to, put some evidence behind what I have in a street car. When you add, stickier tires and coilover suspension, that's when the strut bar is going to be more beneficial. Let's see. Let's take it for a drive and try to, generate some more comments. You tell me what you think. One of the craziest things I heard is that people use the strut brace as a camber tool. So they basically take the strut brace and use the hind joints or turnbuckles to or actually bend the chassis in to get additional camber, which in my opinion, that is absurd because you're bending the chassis, you're affecting the hood gaps, you can't close the hood or it's gonna start rubbing. It's much easier just to slot the holes or create different ball joints with added camber. I mean, putting that much camber on a street car isn't necessary anyway. So there's a big, wide range of reasons why people use strut bars. And some of them I thought was pretty funny. So this is the area where the strut brace goes. So these have been welded on. So the modifications here in the car are seam welds everywhere. Every 1 inch there's seam welds. There's like 7 different layers of sheet metal here. It's all been welded and strengthened together. These have also been welded on. These are my own strut brace brackets. And there's provisions for a bar that goes across the top. And then there's also provisions of a bar that goes diagonally. So we can go diagonally this way, and we can also go diagonally that way. And that's what increases the torsional rigidity of the chassis. So I actually took the car and sort of loaded it at an angle and measured how much it deflected for a given load. So that cross brace prevents the car from kind of twisting. That would be in the case of heavy cornering loads or heavy braking. That's the kind of loads that you see in the front suspension. And just like that, it's in. So a couple of comments on this. These bolts are shoulder bolts, so there's no movement or slop in the way the connection is between the bar and the car. And then the device itself, this is a load cell. It's not squishy. It's a 300-pound load cell. It deflects some, but very, very minimal. It's not like a spring or anything. That's not how they work. It's a very minute strain inside the gauge. And then the same is true here. It's the shoulder bolt. It is not connected down here. So no load is transferred into the diagonal. All the loads of cornering loads, whatever we're gonna find, is gonna be transferred to this load cell. So the theory on these bars is that when you corner, the car is gonna sort of parallelogram over, and that the deflection on this strut tower will be bolstered by the deflection of that strut tower, or it's gonna have stronger resistance to moving like a parallelogram. But like most of these joints are pivots. They will pivot. They will not, there's no play in the joints, but they can pivot. So that's kind of the drawback of these single bars, is that parallelograms can happen even though the bar's there because it can pivot. Okay, let's go. Okay, here we go. Regular drive, and we'll just keep ramping it up till we get some interesting force data. Trying to hit some bumps. time we'll turn and hit the brakes at the same time. Let's try to go up a driveway and see what happens. This will be a speed bump on just one tire. Should load it. Do another speed bump. I'm back, it survived, nothing shorted out, everything is good. I think I got the right data. It's a little bit more than I had in my garage with driving it, but it was like 70 pounds max, and that was mostly in like low speed conditions, like the speed bump or the slight, dips in the road for like water runoff or whatever. So 70 pounds is kind of like me just leaning on it. So if I was just to lean on this bar, that's probably 50 pounds or something. My assumption is you're not going to deflect the car with 50 pounds. You're not going to change your alignment settings. You're not going to cause anything in the suspension to go out of whack with like 50 pounds. I've already talked a lot in this video. You guys let me know what you think. Have you ever seen a tangible driving benefit from having one of these strut bars in it, even if it's one of the big diagonal ones? I'm just curious to know. Inquiring minds want to know. I'm super curious, so let me know your thoughts, and I will see you guys next week. Thanks for watching. Super Techie.